Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is a special presentation of my webinar, Companioning Troubled Souls. This was originally given earlier during the week. Welcome, everyone, to Companioning Troubled Souls. This is a special webinar that I'm presenting that was originally given in a live session with a handful of folks from across the country who joined us for this special discussion on how do we companion, how do we walk with people who are going through trials, troubles, and tribulations. This is a redo recording. We had some technical difficulties when we first did this presentation, so I wanted to make sure we got the slides out there, we got the links working right, and wanted to make sure that we could share this because my heart is to bring encouragement and inspiration and support to you all out there. You all are the agents of hope. You all are spreading faith, hope, and love in all of your contexts, whether you're in healthcare as a nurse or a social worker, a CNA, whether you're in the field of law or police departments or helping out with homeless ministry or helping out in a local church or faith community. I myself have ties with local hospice care in the Denver metro area for the last 12 years. I also serve at my local church. I've had the privilege and honor of training and walking alongside of many agents of hope through the Denver Rescue Mission and many other connections. And so what I've decided to do is put together some presentations and put together some material that would bring hope, encouragement, and support to you all. You all are agents of hope. You all are out there spreading faith, hope, and love in so many different areas and backgrounds and opportunities. So this is for you. I hope you'll find it enjoyable. I hope you'll find it encouraging. I hope you'll be able to learn something and grow from this experience. So I'm going to be sharing my screen along the way and look forward to receiving your feedback after you watch this video. So companioning troubled souls. Really the goal of this is to go on a journey with the lost, lonely, broken, and shattered to find hope. And as you'll see, we'll be using this journey metaphor, this going on a journey, companioning these folks who are going through troubled times. And I want to encourage you to begin as I share a story with you. The story I'm calling, Who is the Bridesmaid? She was always the bridesmaid and never the bride. She returns to sweep the rice after the church had cleared, dreaming of her day to wear white. Every outfit and makeup that she put on each day was a combination to impress the suitors that she knew were waiting just outside her door on her way to work, on her way to church, on her way to the grocery store. Yet her family never showed much attention. They didn't really think she had much potential, had anything to offer a suitor. Just figured she'd become some old maid someday after becoming the bridesmaid for all her friends. Always the bridesmaid and never the bride, the old saying goes. And yet she had longings and dreams. She longed and dreamed of marriage and motherhood. She dreamed of raising a family, of spreading love and care and joy to children and grandchildren throughout her generations. Yet everyone around her just tended to laugh her off and say, oh, that's a nice dream, honey, but, you know, it'll never come together. Not for girls like you. Friends in white walked down the aisle one by one. The father blessed. The unions were sealed with a kiss, and the bridesmaid found her smile each and every time. Then one day, there were no more weddings. There was no more rice to be swept up. She was laid to rest in the churchyard. No one came. The father blessed, and then he swept the dirt from her grave. So who was this bridesmaid? Any guesses? I'd encourage you along the way today to have a pen and paper, something to write with. Maybe pull out your phone or your mobile device to check on putting some notes in. So who is this bridesmaid? Well, she's Eleanor Rigby from the famous Beatles song, Eleanor Rigby, that The refrain goes, all the lonely people, where do they all come from? It's folks like Eleanor, it's folks like you all work with every day who are feeling the pain of keeping a smile on, always being the bridesmaid, being the best man. Maybe they are married, maybe they do have a family, maybe they walk around with their head held high and have a successful career. And yet deep down inside, there's still something not quite right. There's still something not, some deep longing, some deep connection or need or desire that's not really being met. Adapted from Dr. Larry Crabb in his book, Understanding People, he talks about every human being having three core needs. The first one being safety. We all have a need to feel safe, just like this young man in the picture here checking his connection to the zip line, making sure everything's in working order. We all have a sense and a need for security, especially in these days. It is comforting to go places where people are on watch, where people are keeping vigilant watch for anything uncertain or anything that looks like it could be causing trouble. And finally, we all have a deep, deep need for something to feel significant about. We want our life's work and our life's mission to feel significant. We want to make a difference. We want to know that the effort we made while we were on this earth went towards something greater than ourselves. We want that sense of significance. I like how Dr. Gerald May puts it in his book, Addiction and Grace. Regardless of how we describe it, these deepest longings, it is always a longing for love. It is a hunger to love, to be loved, and to move closer to the source of love. So we all have this deep inner longing like Eleanor Rigby did. She was always the bridesmaid. She would put on the big smile. She'd be so happy for her friends on their special day. She would put her hair and makeup in just a certain way, looking for that love, looking for that appreciation, for that hope. And yet it never came for her. So you could say that during her life and during your life and during my life, we all go through three terrible T's. We all go through troubles, trials, and tribulations. First of all, let's look at troubles. As you'll see on your screen, troubles are just those day-to-day occurrences that can really just be a bummer and give us a bad day. No amount of Starbucks caffeine, no amount of chocolate, nothing just seems to be able to kind of overcome the bad days that come from these troubles. These are just some things in my own life I'm sharing with you. I've recently had a flat tire. My whole family's been battling sickness. My wife and I a week ago and periodically struggle with a lack of sleep. It just seems like we've got so many things spinning through our mind that we just don't quite know what to do with them. We keep a busy schedule. We've got a daughter in school. We have no idea how you all handle it if you've got more than one child in your household, or maybe you already raised your children and had 6, 7, or 8 of them. I don't know. But just it seems like the pace of life, the busy schedule can really be a trouble that we all have to navigate. And I have great bosses and coworkers, but we all have bosses and coworkers, and sometimes it's hard to get along. Sometimes it just seems like the person working next to you or across the office from you or that person you're relying upon just sometimes doesn't come through. We're not perfect, and so someone else's bad day can then in turn give us a bad day. Let's move on to trials. Trials are those things in life that you witness or go through that they just, when they hit you, it knocks you to your knees. These are some things I've witnessed or have people in our close circle of friends have gone through recently that are significant trials. Recently, while I was on shift at the hospital that I serve as an on-call chaplain at, I witnessed a woman get 2 rounds of CPR, and she was 90 years old, frail as can be, and yet they continued to pound on her chest one after another because her family would not sign the order to stop CPR. Recently, in our circle of connections, we heard of a teenager and a family who lost their house in a fire. My wife and I have a dear friend who's enduring panic attacks. We have people in our life and our family and our friends who are going through chronic and terminal illness. And we also just know that it's a trial to go through the raising of your children, your teens. Maybe you have a grandchild who's more of a prodigal son or daughter that you just worry about, that you just get knocked down to your knees, either in worry, despair, or you just spend a lot of time in prayer, praying them through whatever they're going through. Those are all trials. The third terrible T is tribulations. These are the trials and tribulations and the troubles that all build and mount to the point where people go through things. And these are things that have all happened in our circle as well. Either ourselves or people we know of have gone through serious battles with self-harm. We've known a couple different families just in the last year who have been rocked by suicide. Many, many people struggle with addictions of all shapes and sizes. That could be addicted to Starbucks, that could be addicted to ice cream, that could be addicted to cigarettes or marijuana or LSD or whatever the case might be, opioid addictions. This world just seems like more and more people we talk to and meet with are just filled and riddled with overarching fear, anxiety. Isolation seems to contribute to that so much more. People feeling like they're surrounded with 1,000 friends on Facebook, and yet they don't have that one 2 a.m. friend anymore that they feel safe and secure to contact when it feels like their whole world is crumbling under them. And the most common tribulation we all face is the face of death. People are dying. The statistics still say that 1 out of 1 person will die. We are all mortal. We will all face our end. And going through the death, the dying, the prolonged suffering that some people face is a tribulation. So trials will hit you so hard that it knocks you to your knees. Tribulations will hit you so hard that it just knocks you flat on your back. So what would you add to the list? Take out your device or your pen and paper and write down what's a trouble that you would add to the list, something that just causes you to have a really bad day. Or reach out and let me know what you're experiencing. What's a trial that you would add to the list? What's something that has knocked you to your knees? Maybe it's been a loss of a job or felt like a friend betrayed you. And then finally, what are the tribulations that you're walking through? What are the situations that you see people dealing with all the time that cause you to just take notice that people are getting knocked out, people are getting beaten up and devastated by these tribulations all the time? Feel free to write those down, share those, think about those, converse with those with your colleagues and your friends. So of all the different troubles, trials, and tribulations we could possibly look at how to companion people, how to walk with these folks through these difficult days, I chose just to focus on 3 specific ones that all seem to be a bit interconnected. So today in this webinar, and as you're viewing this later, you'll see that loneliness, addictions, and grief are the 3 troubles, trials, and tribulations that we're going to focus on. And you can see that each of these scenarios can fall under each of those categories. Loneliness can just be a day where a spouse is out of town or your friend isn't picking up the phone when you want to chat with them and you're just feeling a little alone. But it's temporary. It just comes and goes as the day goes on, and the next day you're able to connect with the person and things get better. Addiction. Sometimes we can be minimally attached and addicted to something like a game on our cell phone or a certain TV series, and we just can't help but watch. We just are stuck. We're attached to it. We may be able to stop at any time, or we may not be able to stop at any time. But addictions sure have a way of escalating to the point where they can cause significant tribulations, and we don't want to take those lightly. And as I mentioned, the most common trial and tribulation that I've seen people face is just the living with grief. Grief being that natural and normal response to any significant loss. The loss of your keys, the loss of your teddy bear, the loss of your car if it got totaled in a wreck, the loss of a job, the loss of a friend, a coworker, a family member. sometimes just the loss of innocence, of our innocence in this world. And each generation has gone back years and years and years to each significant national crisis or war or event that has kind of shocked our system, and we've all had a collective grieving and mourning over those things. I love this quote from a former Surgeon General of the United States. During my years caring for patients, the most common pathology I saw was not heart disease or diabetes, it was loneliness. Dr. Vivek Murthy, former Surgeon General of the United States. So let's dive into loneliness. Did you know in Great Britain, they've recently created a cabinet position basically in their government called the Minister of Loneliness? Over 9 million people in Great Britain admit to feelings of loneliness, to feelings of isolation, feeling like they're all alone, just have no hope, have nothing to look forward to. Recently, CV Outreach did a study, and they came to find out that Denver ranked as the 3rd most lonely city in the United States. And that's my hometown here. I'm a Colorado native, been living in Denver for over 20 years now. And we have seen our population, it just seems like, explode the last 10 years. And 20 years ago, the population had another huge explosion. We're trying to woo Amazon to come to town to build a new headquarters. We've got conventions in town. We've got industries just booming and thriving everywhere. And yet, right behind Washington, D.C. and Las Vegas, Denver ranks as the 3rd most lonely city in the United States. Other cities like Baltimore, Maryland, and other states like North Dakota rank as the most loneliest cities and states in the United States. Did you know that heart disease, diabetes, dementia, and even suicide attempts all can be contributed and escalated by a sense of loneliness, feeling like there's no one out there to count on, feeling like we're all alone in this great big world of ours? So what do we do with needs and desires? You know, we have a need for love. A lot of us have this need or this desire to put our relationship status on social media. I saw a recent Washington Post headline that said millennials are picking pets over people. Just a second, going to pause our recording. Never mind, we're just going to go right through here. Excuse me for that. So you have this sense that millennials are picking pets over people. You have this sense that we're more isolated than ever. And, you know, what do we do with these longings? What do we do with these needs? We can either repress these needs, we can push those needs down, or we can try to attach ourselves to something that we think will fill those needs. That attachment could be a person, that attachment could be a substance, that attachment could be thrill rides or seeking adventure, but often those attachments can be very harmful. Did you know that loneliness is one of the most common feelings caused by addiction? It says over 12 million Americans used an illicit drug within the past 30 days. And often loneliness is a root cause, a root sense that leads people to overeat, overdrink, over-adrenalize, overtake substances for that rush, that high, or to numb those feelings, to try to repress those feelings of isolation and loneliness to the point where we won't feel at all. Just so we're clear, addiction is any compulsive, habitual behavior that limits the freedom of human desire. It is caused by the attachment or the nailing of desire to specific objects. By Dr. Gerald May, Addiction and Grace. Addiction is a complicated, complex problem all over the world. Just here in the United States, over 20 million adults in the U.S. battle addiction. Tobacco, alcohol, illicit drugs cost us more than $740 billion as a nation. That's healthcare expenses, that's lost wages, lost productivity, that's treatment expenses, that's the cost of criminal prosecution, the cost of jail time for folks who get so caught up into it that they start to do illegal things. Recently, this might not be a surprise to you, but the sharpest increase in drug overdose deaths is related to fentanyl. Addiction can take place in the mind and the body and the spirit. This picture we have in front of us is a man who has the desire and sees himself in the mirror as Superman. He has this desire to feel significance, to feel like he's able to go out there and conquer the world. And it looks like he might be a bit addicted to his biceps in this picture. Maybe not. Maybe he's going to be drafted in the NFL this week. Addiction of the mind. We learn coping mechanisms that we attach ourselves to. We learn habits to deal with our unmet longings, our unmet desires, our loneliness. And it's just a mind struggle. We know that in our mind, the chemicals, the neurons, and the systems that are firing, we know that they're changed by the sense of addiction. We also know that addiction happens in the body. It can happen in our muscles and our bones and our belly. And yet we know it's also a spiritual component to addiction. Spiritual component to addiction could be realizing that we were meant for something more. We're meant for freedom. We're meant to be living from freedom, from a sense of freedom, that we are free human beings, free choice individuals meant to live our own life. And yet we can also live for freedom. We can be motivated by that freedom. And yet when we attach to chemicals, or we attach to unhealthy relationships, or we attach to anything of that nature, it really, it really harms us. It really keeps us from experiencing that freedom, that spirit that we were created to experience. Now let's look at grief and death and dying. It's sad that 1 in 5 children will lose someone close to them by the age of 18, whether that's a parent, a grandparent, best friend, a sibling. And if you think about it, just over 2 million, almost 3 million people die in the United States each year. That could be unfortunate deaths like a newborn infant to a woman who is 110 years old. It could be after a long, prolonged illness, or it could be in morning traffic on a person's way to work. And so if 2.53 million people are dying each year, that means over 8 million people in the United States are experiencing a significant bereavement, grief, the loss of a loved one. And that doesn't even account for the griefs of what we mentioned earlier: loss of identity, loss of hope, loss of connectedness, loss of a job, loss of a pet. And yet also we realize that 1 out of 20 children, 15 and younger, will suffer the loss of a parent. That is a really staggering number to think about. So in my childhood classroom, we usually had a classroom full of about 20 to 25 students. So that meant one of us would have already lost the loss of a parent. And that oftentimes was me. I lost my dad when I was just a little baby at 9 months old. And so you can see that grief and death and dying is a very real trial, trouble, and tribulation that people go through. And you can see, or might know about, the famous grief cycle from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. I oftentimes also refer people to a great YouTube video called The Grief Giraffe. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. And yet also another complication, another tribulation that some people face is really literally they are scared to death. They fear their own mortality. So as a result of that, they're oftentimes caught racing into the moment. They're caught living fully. They're the ones that are the daredevils. They're the ones that are skydiving, high-rise climbing, tightrope walking, climbing mountains all over the world, oftentimes as a coping mechanism to that internal, sometimes subconscious fear of their own mortality. I'd like to share with you all a video presentation that just really touches on the unique sense of children and the losses that they go through. This is put out by the National Hospice Foundation, and it's called Grief Through a Child's Eyes.
I'm here to honor my mom.
I'm here to honor my dad.
I'm here to honor my stepdad and my granny.
The main mission of Camp Aloha has always been to reach children who have had losses of various kinds and to help them come together in such a way that they find that their grief is normalized. Our children come to us having experienced losses of all kinds. Many of our kids have come to us through our hospice families and have experienced their loved ones dying from cancer or other what we might consider to be natural causes.
I am here to honor my grandma. My grandma, she died from cancer. I wanted her to know that I'm okay without her, but I'm not at the same time. I'll start crying because I'll say, my little brother won't know my grandma. And then now, every time I hold him up to a picture of my grandma, he'll reach for it. Her name starts with M and he'll go,
My best friend, Jonathan, fell into the river. And obviously he couldn't get out. Grieving, people deal with it different ways, going to talk to people and everything, and it make it way better. The big moment at camp is the campfire. So what happens is the children, prior to camp, they write a letter to their loved ones, so they get to send their letter to their loved ones through the fire.
My brother always wanted to listen to me, and before he died, I wanted to, but he died, I can't do it anymore.
My papa died on his birthday.
Hospice care is so vital in end-of-life issues. If we acknowledge it and honor it and talk about it and allow it to happen naturally, then people will process much better.
It's been pretty hard, but I stay strong because life is about hello and life is about goodbye.
Wow, isn't that so amazing? Life is about hello, life is about goodbye. And so that's why we need companions. That's why we need trusted souls to walk alongside of another soul in their times of trouble, trial, and tribulation. So if you still have that sheet of paper or that notebook or that device handy that you're taking some notes on, what is the first word that comes to mind when you hear the word companion? Go ahead and type in your answer or write it out, or let me know. What is it that comes to mind when you think about being a companion and walking alongside of another person? What's one word that comes to mind? So at this point, we've looked at the needs that every human being has for safety, security, for significance. We have these deep needs, these deep longings that sometimes we just don't quite know what to do with, or we don't feel like they're being completely fulfilled. And so we tend to repress them, we tend to push them down, or we tend to attach ourselves, attach our very life to something or someone else, thinking that their life will bring life to us, will bring the safety, security, significance to us. That might be a bottle of Budweiser, that might be opioid prescriptions, that might be overeating, that might be taking dangerous risks at all cost to personal well-being, just to try to meet those needs. And it can lead to three major, what I would call, all sorts of troubles and trials and tribulations. The three big ones that I think are very common, very much in line with the people that you and I serve on a daily basis, and that's loneliness, and that's addiction, and that's grief. So now we're going to shift our focus into how do we companion people who are going through the terrible 3 T's. How do we companion them? So the word companion comes from 2 words, com, which is the word with in Latin, I believe, and pan, which is the word bread. So with bread, companion is coming with bread to someone. And so in other words, you could say that a companion is someone that you would share a meal with, or it's a traveling partner through a journey. So companioning, what do you need? Well, I think we all need some life-giving water, some life-giving energy. If we're going to go on a long walk, a long hike with someone, whether it's through the desert or the wilderness or the rainforest or the winter tundra, we're going to need some life-giving water, which is basically energy. It's going to be our own positive, reassuring, healthy well-being, as much energy and as much positivity that we can muster up to go along with someone. We'll need to muster that up for the journey. We'll also need some bread for the journey. We'll also need nourishment. So what kind of nourishment? Well, it depends. It's up to each individual that we're walking alongside. Sometimes it's spiritual nourishment along the lines of meditation or prayer. Maybe it's physical nourishment. It's literally taking bread for the journey. I remember as a kid, every time there was a family funeral or there was someone in our church who was dying or had passed on, we'd go to someone's house and we'd bring a casserole. And it just seemed like that was the companioning that we knew how to do. We'd just bring food to someone, and yet they, in their grief, usually didn't want food. They had lost their appetite, lost their interest, and that was the last thing they wanted to look at was another mishmash casserole with the mystery meat and the green beans on top of it. But at the same time, maybe it's a cup of coffee. Maybe, again, it's literally a bottle of water. Maybe it is scheduling a time for lunch 6 weeks, 6 months after a significant trial or trouble has hit someone's life. And we also need a comfortable pair of shoes. If we're going to be going on a journey with someone, we have to be prepared for the length of the journey. This is not a short-term, immediate, quick fix. This is a long-haul process where we're step by step by step, sometimes 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, and yet we still got to be in our best shoes and ready to move forward. So how do we companion? Well, we need to companion gracefully, and we need to companion with a lot of patience. We need to realize that companioning people through their troubles, their trials, their tribulations, especially the greater and the greater and the greater their pain, their suffering, their instability is, the more grace, the more patience, the more mercy, the more understanding we're going to need to bring for the journey. So first of all, we companion gracefully. Second of all, we focus on the journey and not the destination. We focus on the long end of the road. We focus on the intended steps that we're getting on, and yet once we get that in mind, once we say, okay, I can imagine a year from now what this relationship, what this journey is going to look like. Now we're just going to set that to the side for now. We're just going to start walking. We're just going to start taking it a step at a time. We're just going to look for the next landmark, just a couple steps in front of us that we can celebrate when we get to. On long hikes, sometimes you know that, okay, the next hill we're going to climb is going to lead us into a beautiful valley, and so that's where we're going to stop and drink water and take a rest, and we're going to take pictures of the beautiful surroundings. So we're not necessarily focused on the destination per se at the end of the hiking trail, but we're just saying, okay, let's focus on maybe the mini destinations along the way. Let's look at the mini mile markers along the way that we can enjoy, that we can reach for, that we can celebrate when we've gotten there. And I love how Dr. Alan Wolfelt, in his book, Companioning the Bereaved, he puts it that we are to be a temporary guardian of another soul. We are like the guardian angel that you see on your screen in the picture. So companioning the bereaved is not about analyzing, assessing, fixing, or solving someone's grief. Instead, it's about being totally present to the mourner, even being a temporary guardian of her soul. That's Alan Wolfelt's quote. In his book, he specifically helps people understand how to walk with people who've experienced grief of many different shapes and sizes. And I think his metaphor of companioning, going along with people in the journey, applies to the lonely, the addicted, the hurting, the troubled, whatever the situation might be. Kids on the playground who are feeling all alone, kids whose family is going through divorce. Those are kids as well that would need someone to walk alongside of them and be present with them. If you're going through, if you're a 9-year-old and your parents are getting divorced, it feels very unknown, dark, bewildering. So we go into the wilderness with them. We walk alongside of them in the unknown, in the mystery of it all, not claiming to have any answers, not claiming to know exactly how it's all going to work out, refraining from saying, oh, I know exactly how you feel. But we just go into the wilderness and we honor the person's spirit. We honor that they are a spirit being, that they have a will, a desire, dreams, passions that we may not be able to tap into right away, but we want to honor that they're there. We want to honor the will, the desire, the inner being of each person. And we want to listen with heart, not just our head. I usually will train people and talk about listen with your hands. And so that means anything you can listen for that you could touch. Listen to the physical. And then listen with your head. So you begin to listen and you begin to put the pieces of the puzzle together, and it takes some mental work as you're listening to this person's story. You're listening for metaphors. You're listening for word pictures that might be tips of where this person's coming from. But ultimately, we don't stay in our head, but we drop it down to our heart. We open up our heart to this person. We just receive them in. We receive their hurt, their pain, their struggling, their laughing and crying all at once. And we just open our heart up as a home for their hurting and their suffering so that we can be there to welcome them in. We also are there to bear witness. We're also just to watch and walk with them and be a chronicle of what they're going through, without judgment, without expectations, without putting anything on them. Again, we're walking alongside. We're not in front of them, but we're side by side through the journey. And we need to remember to be silent, still, peaceful during this time. We don't need to frantically race around and race around and race around. We need to respect that there's going to be disorder and confusion and chaos. And yet, during this disorder and confusion and chaos, as the companion, if we take this present, going into the wilderness, honoring, listening, witnessing spirit, if we add to that respect and learning, learn from them, ask questions, ask them to teach us what it's like to be in their shoes. And we do that all with a whole healthy dose of compassionate curiosity. And I love that. I just think that the more curious we can be about this person, their life, their story, asking open questions, inviting them to share as they're able and as they're willing, validating the concerns that they're sharing, validating the emotional pains and the heartache. I hear you saying this, and it just must break your heart to have to go through this. Or I hear a sense of sadness in your voice today. How are you doing? So again, we compassionately and curiously invite them to tell powerful stories. During this long walk, during this long journey, we're meandering and we're taking lots of time for silence. We're taking lots of time to take in refreshment and refueling from nature, from beauty, from sense of faith or spirituality. sense of music, whatever it might be. And then we're also inviting the chance to tell stories along the journey. There's nothing like a nice long hike throughout the woods and the peaceful quiet, just to have time to tell stories and invite that, to say, would you tell me about your loved one, or would you tell me again what happened that day that you were laid off from your job, or tell me about what was it like when you first met this loved one that you're now no longer with, or tell me what it was like when you entered that rehab program. What were you thinking? What were you feeling? Were you scared? Were you mad? Were you upset? What's going on? And then validate. It sounds like you're really feeling pretty mad about this situation. I hear a lot of anger in your voice, or what picture comes to mind as you're sharing this story? You might share a picture, as I'm hearing your story, I get a picture of an angel standing right beside you. Have you ever thought of that? Or I see strength in you. I see courage in you. I see hope in you. Henry Nouwen says that healers are hosts who patiently and carefully listen to the story of the suffering strangers. So what are our first steps to companioning, whether it's loneliness or addiction or grief or family distress, whatever it might be? We have to begin by knowing that we have to keep this phrase out of your vocabulary. Never, ever, ever say, oh, I know how you feel. We don't like it when people say that to us, so why do we say that to them? Be honest with yourself. Don't play therapist. Even if you're a counselor and you're doing private therapeutic work with this person, I always try to encourage people, companion first and then therapy second. Again, don't try to just fix them. Here's 3 easy steps just to fix all your problems. It doesn't work that way. Embrace that there's going to be feelings of loss and uncertainty, and depending on the depth of their despair, they may emote so much upon you that you just don't even know what end is up and what end is down. But we have to embrace that to an extent. Obviously, if we see that this person is threatening to harm themselves, or this person is in grave, grave danger, we don't just do nothing at that point, but we take appropriate steps to get them to safety, get them in a safe place with proper mental health and physical health care providers. We anticipate needs, but we don't force solutions. We might think, okay, maybe in 6 weeks, I think I can anticipate that my friend Sue and I might be overdue for a coffee chat. So I'm going to just kind of schedule in a reminder in my phone to contact Sue in 6 weeks. But if Sue isn't ready for it and Sue isn't wanting that, I'm not going to force it. I'm not going to jump in there and force her to have coffee with me. Always, always, always bring your heart, bring your humor, and bring your hope. Sometimes we just have to laugh because we're so overwhelmed, so overburdened, so unimaginable of what could happen next. I love the end of this quote by Helen Keller. So long as you can sweeten another's pain, life is not in vain. That's really my goal for us today, is that you all would be encouraged, inspired, equipped even more to companion well, to go on these journeys well, whether it's with homeless people, whether it's with children in your classroom, whether it's with your patient in the intensive care unit, whether it's as a hospice social worker or chaplain or minister or counselor or whatever you're doing, or maybe it's your next door neighbor just lost a loved one, or your next door neighbor has a teenager that's rebelling and causing all sorts of grief and all sorts of troubles and trials and tribulations. Just to learn how to walk along these people really well, because by walking alongside of them, you'll see that they will regain hope, they will regain perspective, they will regain a sense of purpose and meaning when it seems like all hope, purpose, and meaning is lost. So as long as you can sweeten another's pain, life is not in vain. What questions, what comments, what feedback do you all have? Hopefully, as you've watched this replay, you've gained some new ideas. You've been encouraged to keep doing the things that you're doing that are great companionship skills. Hopefully, you've learned a trick or two. Hopefully, you've learned something that you can apply with people you're walking alongside. And remember, as you walk alongside of people, you yourself have to make sure that you're taking in the proper nourishment and care for your soul. And I'll also send out a link to replay the soul keeping webinar that we did last month. They go hand in hand. We have to care for our soul so that we can be there to companion the souls of other people when they go through their troubles and trials and tribulations. Please reach out. Let me know if you found this to be helpful or not. I appreciate your feedback. I just have a great big passion and heart to see more and more agents of hope out there spreading faith, hope, and love, faith to the faithless, hope to the hopeless, and love to the brokenhearted. Thanks again for joining me today for companioning the troubled souls, and I hope and pray that your journey on this path with troubled souls will be fruitful and filled with adventure. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.